The first sign that something was wrong was when my key wouldn't turn in the front door. I jiggled it, forced it, even cursed under my breath, but it was like the whole lock was seized up. I tried the garage door next, same thing. Then the back door. The key barely fit, and when it did, it wouldn't budge. My heart dropped. Someone had tampered with every single lock on my house. I'm Logan Ellis, a 36-year-old mechanic who bought this house to get away from the chaos of the city. Turns out I just traded it for a new kind of chaos. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association, ruled with an iron fist by Karren Whitmore. She was a walking cliché, blonde bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and a voice that could peel paint off walls. Karren had it out for me ever since I refused to plant approved foliage in my yard. Apparently, my choice of native wildflowers was unacceptable and disruptive to community aesthetics. I laughed it off at first. Then came the violation notices. Then the fines. Now this. I yanked my phone from my pocket and called a locksmith. While I waited, I walked the perimeter of the house. That's when I spotted its small globs of dried, clear goo around each keyhole. Super glue. Someone had poured glue into all my locks. The locksmith, a guy named Pete, showed up in an old white van. He took one look and whistled low. "Man, this wasn't random," he said. "Glue in all the locks. Someone doesn't like you." "Yeah," I muttered. "I've got a pretty good idea who." Pete shook his head as he worked. "You might want to get some cameras up. Whoever did this might not be done." That night, I installed cameras above all the doors, hidden but with a perfect view of anyone getting too close. I wasn't about to let this happen again without proof. 3 days later, I got the proof I needed. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the camera app and there she was, Karren Whitmore herself, creeping around in her little pink tracksuit, clutching a bottle of glue like it was her secret weapon. She leaned into my front door, squeezing the glue into the lock, just like some petty criminal. I stared at the footage, my jaw set. She wasn't just harassing me with fines and letters anymore. This was vandalism, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. By morning, I had the footage burned onto 3 separate flash drives, uploaded to the cloud, and sent to my personal email. No way was I letting it disappear. After grabbing a quick breakfast, I drove straight to the local police station. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. A woman behind the front desk looked up, her badge reading Officer Ray's. "Need to report a crime," I said. "Got evidence too." Within minutes, I was sitting at a small desk across from a detective named Marcus Hale. He was a heavyset man with a sharp gaze, the kind that could pin you to your seat without him raising his voice. "All right, Mr. Ellis," he said, plugging my flash drive into his computer. "Walk me through it." I kept it short and clean. The tampered locks, the history of harassment. The footage of Karren committing vandalism. Detective Hale clicked through the video, his eyebrows lowering the longer he watched. "This isn't some prank," he said. "This is felony-level vandalism, tampering with private property, targeted harassment. You're lucky you caught it on video." He leaned back, tapping a pen against his notepad. "We'll need an official statement. After that, we'll bring her in." By noon, a patrol car was rolling up to Willow Creek. I wasn't trying to gloat, but when I saw Karren being led out of her house, hands cuffed behind her back while she shrieked about mistaken identity, it was hard not to feel a jolt of satisfaction. I stayed back, out of sight. No need to poke the bear more than necessary. Let the law do what it was supposed to. But the real fireworks started later that week. I got a letter, hand-delivered by a teenager who looked like he hated every minute of it. The envelope was thick, stuffed with official-looking papers. Inside was a notice from the Willow Creek HOA board, signed by the vice president, Mitchell Crane, accusing me of slanderous behavior and damaging the reputation of the community. They were threatening to fine me $5,000. Fuming, I tossed the papers onto the kitchen table and called my buddy Aaron. He wasn't just a friend, he was a civil attorney who owed me a favor after I rebuilt the engine on his classic Mustang. When Aaron answered, his voice was dry. Tell me you didn't glue her locks shut in retaliation." I told him everything, right down to the fake fine letter. He whistled low. "That's retaliation, plain and simple. They know they can't stop the police investigation, so they're trying to pressure you into backing off. Good news is, they just handed you a civil case on a silver platter." The next morning, Aaron and I filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, abuse of power, and violation of homeowner rights. Aaron also sent a cease and desist letter, citing the specific HOA bylaws they'd violated, and there were a lot more than I realized. Turns out, HOA boards have to follow their own rules to the letter. Things like issuing fines without a hearing, illegal. Retaliating against a homeowner during an active criminal case, also illegal. Meanwhile, word was spreading fast around Willow Creek. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before were stopping me while I worked in my garage or mowed the lawn. "Hey man," said Mr. Jensen from 2 houses down, "heard about what happened. Good for you. That woman's been a nightmare for years." Another neighbor, a nurse named Monica, dropped off a box of cookies with a note. "Thanks for standing up to the queen bee." I hadn't realized how many people had been living under Karren's thumb. The entire neighborhood had been quietly suffering, too scared to push back. A week later, I was called to testify during the preliminary hearing. I wore my best button-down shirt and clean jeans. No sense pretending I was anything other than a blue-collar guy, but I wasn't about to look sloppy either. The courtroom was small, and the judge was a wiry woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Karren sat at the defendant's table, looking like she had bitten into a lemon. Her lawyer kept whispering frantically in her ear, but she just stared daggers at me. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it straight facts, the history of harassment, the vandalism, the footage. The prosecutor played the video for the court. The room was dead silent except for the sound of glue squirting into my locks. The judge frowned deeply. "Miss Whitmore," she said after the prosecution rested, "this is not only a clear case of vandalism, but an abuse of the power entrusted to you by your community. Bail is set at $20,000. Karren gasped like she'd been punched in the stomach. I left the courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. But it wasn't over yet. The civil lawsuit against the HOA was still moving forward. Discovery unearthed some nasty surprises. Misuse of HOA funds, falsified violation notices, even shady deals with a landscaping company owned by Karren's cousin. Aaron compiled everything into a neat, brutal packet. At the next HOA meeting, which the board tried to cancel, but legally couldn't, half the neighborhood showed up. People packed into the community center, standing against the walls, whispering among themselves. Mitchell Crane tried to start the meeting with his usual smug attitude. "This meeting is called to order," he said, gavel in hand. "First, we must address the recent, unfortunate events involving Miss Whitmore." Aaron stood up from the back row. "Actually," he said, projecting his voice across the room, "we're here to address the multiple breaches of fiduciary duty committed by the HOA board." He handed thick packets to the nearest attendees, who started passing them around. Pages of evidence, bank statements, fake citations, fraudulent vendor contracts. Murmurs turned into low, angry voices. Mrs. Patel from the corner lot stood up, her voice shaking with fury. "You fined me $600 for unauthorized garden lights that were approved by the city." "You lied to us," more voices joined in. "You threatened to foreclose on my house over a missing mailbox number. You pocketed our dues for years." Mitchell turned beet red. He stammered something about unsubstantiated accusations, but it was too late. Aaron raised a hand. "In light of these findings, we are formally petitioning for a recall election of the entire board, effective immediately." The bylaws allowed it. If 30% of homeowners signed the petition, the board could be dissolved and new elections held. By the end of the meeting, we had signatures from over 60%. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. The old board tried to fight it, hiring a PR firm, sending out desperate letters, even offering community improvement incentives, basically bribes. No one was buying it. The recall election passed in a landslide. Karren, out on bail and wearing sunglasses bigger than her face, was banned from holding any future HOA position. Mitchell and the rest of the board resigned before they could be voted out in disgrace. The new board, led by Monica the nurse and a few other level-headed neighbors, immediately rolled back dozens of ridiculous rules. Fines were reviewed and refunded. Community projects actually started improving the neighborhood instead of just funneling money into someone's pockets. As for me, I replaced all my locks with commercial-grade deadbolts, just in case. I left the cameras up too, but mostly out of habit now. Sometimes, when I sit on my porch, I think about how a bottle of glue almost cost me my home. Instead, it brought down a corrupt regime and gave our neighborhood back to the people who actually live in it. Funny how that works. The weeks after the recall settled into a new kind of rhythm. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, people waved when they passed my house. Kids played in the yards again. Monica's new board started hosting actual neighborhood barbecues instead of those stiff, mandatory meetings Karren used to run like a dictator. I thought we were finally over the worst of it. Then, the audit results came back. Aaron called me one afternoon while I was replacing the brake pads on my truck. "You're gonna want to sit down," he said without preamble. "I'm already on the ground," I muttered, wiping grease off my hands. He didn't laugh. The forensic accountant finished the deep dive into the HOA books. "It's worse than we thought." I picked up a rag and leaned back against the bumper, heart sinking. "How bad?" He rattled it off like he was reading a grocery list. Over $200,000 unaccounted for, fake invoices. Kickbacks to a shell company registered under Mitchell's cousin's name. Unauthorized withdrawals, some of it traced directly to Karren's personal bank accounts. I whistled low. That's embezzlement. Grand larceny too, given the amount. I already notified the district attorney. They're opening a criminal investigation. I hung up feeling like I'd just been hit with a sledgehammer. It wasn't just power trips and petty fines. They had been robbing the entire neighborhood blind for years. The next morning, unmarked police cars rolled into Willow Creek. Plainclothes detectives went door to door, asking residents about HOA dues, suspicious charges, anything they remembered. I answered everything, handing over copies of the documents Aaron and I had dug up during the lawsuit. 3 houses down, they brought Mitchell out in handcuffs. His wife stood on the porch, screaming at the officers about misunderstandings and clerical errors. But nobody was buying it. By that evening, the news vans had arrived. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching reporters set up lights and microphones on the sidewalk. A young woman with sharp eyes spotted me and hurried over. "Are you Logan Ellis?" she asked, holding out a microphone like a weapon. I nodded once. "We've heard you were instrumental in exposing the Willow Creek HOA scandal. Can you comment?" I thought about it for a second, then said, "I just wanted to fix my locks. Guess we ended up fixing the whole neighborhood instead." The story exploded. Local news, then regional. Interviews with Monica with other neighbors who'd been bullied or fined into submission. People called us brave, even heroic, though honestly, most of us had just been tired of being pushed around. Meanwhile, the legal gears kept grinding. The district attorney's office charged Karren, Mitchell, and 2 other former board members with felony grand larceny, conspiracy to commit fraud, and misuse of public funds. The penalties were steep, up to 20 years in prison if convicted. At Monica's suggestion, the new board hired a real management company to handle the HOA's finances with full transparency and monthly reports posted online for every resident to see. No more secret meetings, no more shady fines. Still, not everything could be fixed overnight. One evening, I found a letter stuffed into my mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, just a single sheet of paper with shaky handwriting. "You ruined everything. You'll regret it." I stood there on the curb, the letter fluttering in my hand, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. I didn't bother wondering who sent it. It didn't matter. I took it straight to the police. Detective Hale met me at the station, the same guy who had handled Karren's vandalism case. He read the letter carefully, then bagged it as evidence. "We'll collect fingerprints," he said. "But be on your guard. Some people don't handle consequences well." He wasn't wrong. The next night, someone slashed my truck tires. Fortunately, my new security system caught everything in crystal clear detail. A shadowy figure creeping up the driveway, knife in hand, slashing the front and rear tires before sprinting off into the dark. This time, it wasn't Karren. It was Karren Whitmore, her adult son. When the police picked him up, he folded immediately, confessing that his mother had urged him to send a message. The district attorney added charges of witness intimidation to Karren's growing list of legal problems. Kyle himself got slapped with vandalism, and a restraining order barred both of them from coming within 500 feet of my property. After that, things finally started to settle. Neighbors banded together to rebuild what Willow Creek had lost. We organized real community events, food drives, cleanup days, even a 4th of July block party. People who had been afraid to speak up before found their voices. During the first real town hall meeting, Monica proposed a permanent amendment to the HOA bylaws. Any board member found guilty of fraud or misconduct would be permanently barred from serving in any position of authority, and their names would be published in the community records. The vote passed unanimously. Still, I stayed cautious. Security cameras remained up. I changed my locks again, this time using a system that couldn't be tampered with from the outside. Paranoia, maybe, but after everything, I wasn't about to take chances. One afternoon, as I was installing new motion lights, Mr. Jensen wandered over, sipping from a battered thermos. "You know," he said, "I was thinking, you ever consider running for the board?" I barked a laugh. "Me, I'm just a mechanic, I'm not built for politics." He shrugged. "Maybe that's exactly what we need, somebody who actually gives a damn." I thought about it longer than I expected to, about how close we'd come to losing everything because nobody wanted to rock the boat. About how easy it had been for a few bad people to turn an entire community into their personal kingdom. Maybe it was time to stop thinking someone else would handle it. At the next election, I put my name down for maintenance committee chair, a simple position, nothing flashy. Just making sure the neighborhood stayed clean, safe, and functional. I won by a landslide. Standing in front of my neighbors at the first meeting, I cleared my throat and said, "I'm not here to boss anyone around. I'm here to make sure nobody gets bossed around again." The room broke into applause. Later, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I sat out on my porch, sipping a cold beer, and watched the kids ride their bikes up and down the street. The lawns were a little wilder now, the gardens a little more colorful. People had started planting whatever flowers they liked, not just what was approved. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments over fencing and trash bins and holiday decorations. But now, those arguments ended with real discussions, not threats or fines. And if anyone ever tried to seize power again, well, they'd find out pretty fast that Willow Creek had learned how to fight back, all because one petty act of vandalism pushed the wrong guy too far. Funny how glue, of all things, ended up holding an entire neighborhood together. The first real test of our rebuilt community came sooner than anyone expected. About a month after I joined the maintenance committee, Monica called an emergency meeting. She stood at the front of the room, a thick folder clutched in her hand, her face tight with worry. "We found something worse," she said, voice steady but grim. The room fell silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Monica laid the folder on the table and opened it, revealing photographs of crumbling support beams, mold-blackened walls, and rusted pipes. "Our community pool house," she said, flipping through the images. "It's a disaster waiting to happen. The previous board reported spending nearly $50,000 on full renovations last year. She paused, letting that sink in. There's no record of any renovations ever being done. Murmurs broke out. I leaned forward, studying the photos. Water damage had eaten away at the structural supports. Exposed wiring dangled dangerously close to sagging ceiling tiles. It wasn't just neglect, it was hazardously unsafe. Aaron, sitting in the back, raised his hand. Is the building even up to code? Monica shook her head. Not even close if it had collapsed while people were inside. She trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. The room buzzed with anger. Mrs. Patel stood, her voice trembling. They put our families in danger. They stole the money and left a death trap. Monica nodded. We've already contacted the city inspector. They're coming tomorrow to do a full evaluation. The next morning, a team of inspectors arrived, followed by 2 patrol cars. I watched from a distance as they taped off the pool house, their faces grave. News traveled fast by noon. Monica called another meeting, this time with more serious faces in the room. Detective Hale was there too, standing at the front with a clipboard. He didn't waste time. Preliminary findings suggest deliberate falsification of safety documents, he said. That's felony fraud. Combined with the financial crimes already under investigation, this pushes the case into federal jurisdiction. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I caught Aaron's eye. He gave a slight nod. This wasn't just local mess anymore. The feds were getting involved. Hale continued. We have reason to believe that, in addition to the embezzlement, members of the former HOA board knowingly endangered public safety for personal gain. He paused, scanning the room. Anyone with information about these activities should come forward now. You could be charged as an accessory if you remain silent. That night, my neighbor across the street, a retired electrician named Don, knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable, wringing his cap in his hands. I did some work on the pool house last year, he said. But it wasn't renovations, it was patch jobs. Mitchell paid me under the table to make it look good enough for photos. He said it was just temporary, that real work would be done later. I listened carefully. You have proof, Don nodded. Invoices? Text messages too? I told him to bring everything to Detective Hale immediately. Over the next week, more people came forward. A landscaper confessed to billing the HOA for non-existent projects. A plumber admitted he'd signed off on fake inspections in exchange for cash. Piece by piece, the full picture came together, and it was ugly. Karren and Mitchell hadn't just stolen money. They had orchestrated a massive fraud operation, using community funds to line their pockets while covering it up with doctored documents and fake repairs. And they had endangered lives doing it. When the FBI officially announced joint charges with the district attorney's office, the entire town buzzed with disbelief. Wire fraud, racketeering, endangering public safety. The list went on. The former board members were arrested again, this time by federal agents who didn't bother being discreet. They were marched out of their homes in broad daylight, faces pale and stunned, as neighbors stood on sidewalks watching the spectacle unfold. I stayed on my porch, arms crossed, as the last of the squad cars rolled away. Monica joined me a few minutes later, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She handed me one without a word. We stood there, sipping quietly, the cool afternoon wind rustling the trees. They're going away for a long time, she said finally. Good, I said simply. At the final court hearing months later, the judge didn't hold back. Karren received 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Mitchell got 10. Others involved received varying sentences, depending on their level of cooperation. The neighborhood, meanwhile, moved forward. The city condemned the old pool house and helped secure a grant to rebuild it safely. Monica and the board handled every step of the project openly, posting updates weekly. I volunteered weekends to help clean up the site, along with a rotating crew of neighbors. One afternoon, as we tore down the last of the warped siding, Mr. Jensen leaned on his shovel and said, "Funny, isn't it? They tried to glue us down, trap us, but all they did was stick us together." I chuckled, tossing a rotted plank onto the scrap pile. In spring, the new pool house opened. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, safe, and built by the people who actually lived there. We threw a big barbecue to celebrate. No speeches, no grandstanding. Just burgers, music, and kids racing each other to the pool. As the sun dipped low and the lights flickered on around the courtyard, I sat back in a lawn chair, watching the laughter and life fill the space that once symbolized everything wrong with Willow Creek. Aaron dropped into the chair beside me, handing me a cold soda. "Never thought glue would lead to all this," he said, shaking his head. I laughed quietly. "Sometimes you have to stick around long enough to see the payoff." We clinked our cans together and watched as Monica led a group of kids in a wild game of tag, the echoes of their laughter carrying across the water. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But at least now it was ours. And no one, not a corrupt board, not a petty tyrant, not even a bottle of superglue, was ever going to take that away from us again.